Welcome to the True Wealth Podcast, where we specialize in helping aspiring homeowners break into the real estate market and help investors create and build wealth through real estate. We will be sharing some of our best advice around real estate so you can purchase your first home or grow your real estate portfolio, increase profitability, reduce taxes, and achieve financial freedom. Your host, Seun Adeyemi, is a certified financial planner, mortgage professional, and fellow investor. We want to help you get real so you can pursue your investing dreams with confidence. A real estate acquisition lifestyle is within your grasp. Financial freedom is possible when you have the right mindset, coaching, advice, and community. So, let's get real.
Welcome to the True Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Seun Adeyemi, and today I've got my good friend Othniel Litchmore on this call with us. And today we're going to talk about vetting your prospective tenants. For many real estate investors, the reason why you're getting into the real estate game is to generate enough income to not just only pay your expenses, but potentially give you the kind of lifestyle you're looking for. And so part of doing that really is being able to vet your tenants. Othniel is a realtor, and so he'll be able to shed some light on some of the things that we generally look for when we're looking for prospective tenants. I'll share my perspective. Othniel will share his perspective, and we'll just kind of take it from there. So Othniel, when looking for tenants, what are some of the things you generally look for?
Well, I mean, and it's not just real estate investors. You mentioned real estate investors in the intro. I mean, this is also advice for people looking to rent their basement. Like you mentioned, house hacking and stuff like that. So investors or just amateur investors, amateur landlords. And so what do we look for? You got to be able to determine income and determine credit score. So, I mean, there's legalities around this. The Residential Tenancy Act sort of specifies what a landlord is able to request as they attempt to screen prospective tenants. So again, it comes back to income. You need to be able to determine income, and you want to determine the person's credit score. That's sort of the bounds of where things go. So, and typically to determine income, you want to get a job letter from the prospective tenant. It has to have their information as far as how much money they're making, how long they've been employed, the status of their employment, and someone that you can contact, who you can contact to verify this information. Additionally, when it comes to credit score, now there are different ways to go about this. So, I'm a realtor and I help landlords to find tenants. But also a lot of people try to do it themselves. And so it may be difficult for you as a amateur landlord to get the credit score or sort of pull the credit score yourself. Now, there are different programs out there that you can use to do that. We just spoke about one, Sean. It is called, I forgot what it's called. Jeez.
It is called Single Key. Yeah, SingleKey.com.
Where you can send the link, use that program or use that operation to send the link to the prospective tenant, and that allows you to get access to their credit score, and you can technically pull it yourself. And then the reason why you want to pull it yourself is because, unfortunately, people, some prospective tenants have used fraudulent documents as a way to subvert the screening process. So ideally, you want to be able to pull that credit report for yourself in order
directly from
determine.
the credit bureau, right? So it's not somebody giving you their credit score, which is probably sometimes doctored. We've seen that a lot. And let's unpack this a little bit. So first you said employments, and then you said credit score. With employments, someone gives you a job letter. One of the things you want to look at a job letter is, okay, what's the name of the company? Verify that this is a legit company. And there are ways to just do a Google search. You can find that this is a legit company. And in addition to that, you want to look at, okay, so what's the contact number on that job letter? Because this is really crucial. And you want to make sure that the contact number on the job letter matches the number publicly or similar to the publicly listed number for that company. Because otherwise, someone can give you an employment letter that says, I work for this company, which is a legit company, but the number you're calling to verify that employment is their sister. And that number doesn't match the public records for that company. So those are little things that you want to be mindful of when you're trying to verify employment. Is make sure the job letter is legit, make sure the company is legit, make sure the number you're calling it matches the one online. And then pay stubs, right? You want to look at pay stubs to make sure that, okay, if they're earning $80,000 a year or $70,000, whatever that income is, does that correspond to what the pay stubs? You want to get at least 2 pay stubs, sometimes even 3, because maybe someone works full-time or works part-time and the hours are not very consistent, but you want to kind of get an average. So 2-3 pay stubs will generally give you an average of what their income is, and then you can cross-reference that to see that matches the income on the employment letter.
On the employment letter, yeah.
So then there's also the income, right? If someone is renting a 3-bedroom house and the 3-bedroom house is $2,500 a month, but they're making $3,000 a month, or they're making $3,500 a month. For me, that's a little suspect. Not because the income is not legit, but can they really afford this place that they're trying to rent? That's another piece of looking at the income when you're trying to verify a prospective tenant. Right?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned like the price points, and I think the price points are also important to hone in on, because like, let's say you're renting a home for like $5,000 a month. Like, I think you got to really do your homework on who this person is and where they're employed, what their credit score and everything, every way that they've detailed their story, because like $5,000 a month is a lot of money. And the pool of tenants for that sort of arrangement is smaller.
Right.
So and my thing on that was also that's where you're likely going to see fraud and possible deception and stuff like that, because the pool is so small. And like, it's funny. This is leading me to another train of thought that we talked earlier, but I didn't think of it. When you're putting up your place for rent, you have to recognize that a lot of tenants, not a lot of tenants, but some tenants are in tough situations, desperate situations. And they are also trying to find a landlord that is also in a desperate situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they get the impression, and sometimes that's where fraud and scams happen, if they get the impression that the landlord is very desperate and is very willing to just sort of rent this unit out to the first person that comes, for whatever reason, maybe it's just the quality of the unit, maybe it's the price point, maybe it's something along those lines. That's when you especially have to look out for fraud, potential fraud, because as I said, it's unfortunately we have a housing affordability crisis, and there are a lot of people in desperate situations. And when in the desperate situations, some people, not all, not even most, but some people are willing to resort to fraud. And so again, if you have like a property that's probably expensive, $5,000 a month, I would say that's what, especially in the GTA here in Toronto, you want to look out specifically, really double check the documents, double check the income, double check everything, the legitimacy of the company and everything like that. Because again, you're going to put the tenant pool is so small, and it's very likely that you'll also pull in people that are a little desperate and willing to, and they can sense your desperation too. So you wanna make sure you do your homework on that. So again, that's the thing. You sort of have to analyze what's going on both sides, what you have for rent, and the sort of people that it will attract, and use that in your screening process.
I remember one time when I rented my basement in Ajax, and oh man, I was desperate to get somebody in there, and that cost me, because she came in with a sub story. And the truth is, people go through hard things, but at the same time, sometimes it's not so much the hard things, it's just the lifestyle the person has. but I think they sensed that I was desperate, and
Really?
they came and offered me, I'll pay you 6 months up front, and I'll pay you 6 months up
That's what I
front,
mean.
and
Yes.
this is a situation. She gave me all sorts of stories. My ex-husband, this and that. I just switched jobs, and I didn't vet. I didn't look at these things properly. She gave me her ID, but I don't even think I verified that the ID was legit.
Uh,
And the pay stubs, I don't think I looked at it carefully enough to see that can this woman actually afford what I was trying to collect for rent. And just like you said, she sensed that I was desperate, and she provided all sorts of documents that it wasn't after the fact. And we didn't end up collecting 6 months. I think we collected 3 months back then. And this
mm,
is me as a novice landlord, which, as far as I know now, that's actually not legal, right? You should only collect the first and the last month's rent. And this lady knew that. She knew the ins and outs of the landlord and tenant board, that she offered me that. And when I took it, she realized, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And
I
so
know.
I'm going to take him to the cleaners. And that's all I got. That first 3 months she gave me, that's all I got. She was in there for almost a year before I could kick her out. And it wasn't until I started looking back at the documents she sent to me, verifying and crossing my I's and dotting my T's, dotting my I's and crossing my T's, that I, that I realized that I should have verified all the information she gave me properly to see that was this tenant actually a good tenant for me to have. But
Yeah. If her background matched the story that she told you, right? I guess that's the thing. And sorry, just to touch on something there, it's not necessarily illegal to collect that much rent up front. It's illegal to request it.
right,
So a
okay,
tenant,
okay,
yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah.
right.
So a tenant can decide, hey, for simplicity's sake, or just to make my application a bit stronger, I will give you 6 months up front or whatever. Well, you can't
Well,
request
you
it as
can't
a landlord.
request
It's
it.
like, yeah, you can't say I will only rent this place to someone that gives me 6 months up front. You know what I mean? So
Because then that's discrimination, right?
yes,
At least it's not everybody that has that kind of money sitting in the bank. People are working hard, and as they're making the money, they're factoring in rents on a monthly basis. They don't necessarily have a pile sitting that they can give you 6 months. So as a landlord, you cannot request that, but you can if the prospective tenant offers. Now, not every sub story is necessarily a bad thing, right? We have to be empathetic when we are reviewing tenants, and there are situations where people do have stories. People have gone through hard things, and I think it's up to the landlord to be able to kind of read through that and to read through what's true, what's not, and how does this play on the character of the of the prospect. Because I had another example where the tenant came to me. He had just gone through a divorce, and so his credit was not exactly pristine, because divorce or breakup can have a really negative impact on a really negative impact on people's credit. And so in his case, I was able to read through the lines and look at this guy's character to say, this guy is legit. He has a solid income. Yes, his credit was not the greatest, but I understood the situation he was going through. And so I still allowed him to come on as a tenant. In this case, that was the best tenant I ever had. He mowed my lawn. He cleaned up after himself. The place was impeccable. When he left, he got us a gift. So we have to be empathetic when we're looking at prospective tenants, but at the same time, we can be suckers to taking any sub story that somebody comes to give us. So we've talked
yeah,
about employment, credit score. Sorry,
yeah.
you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I was saying it's a fine line. It's a fine line in terms of determining, like, who you want to accept as a tenant. You want to be empathetic. I've had situations like that before where, I met a tenant once. She was unemployed, recently got laid off from GM, a single mom going through a divorce, and stuff. And she gave me a job letter for a job that she was going to get in the future. I don't think she eventually took that job. So fortunately, she had some money in the bank, and she told me she had some money in the bank, but she managed to pay the rent, not always on time, but always managed to pay the rent. She was there for a few years, and basically I took a chance because I mean, typically you would not, in my professional, from my professional standpoint or in my professional experience, you probably want to do a lot more investigation into a prospective tenant like that. I'm not saying just shut the door officially, but like as someone that's unemployed, someone who is unemployed, someone who is, I believe she still had decent credit score, but she was unemployed and she was a single person, meaning we don't have two incomes to support the rent if something happens. That's usually not recommended. But as I
Right.
said, and as you said, you want to have some empathy occasionally. You want to, do your due diligence, but there's a little bit of empathy and a little bit of trust involved in this business of finding tenants. And so you have to strike that balance between doing your due diligence, using a little bit of empathy, trusting the person in front of you, and assessing their character to determine whether or not they will fulfill their obligation of the lease agreement.
And part of that due diligence is if they give you a job letter, call the employer, verify the employments that it matches, verify the pay stubs. Sometimes I would even go a step further because I'm coming from a mortgage broker background where we're verifying the income a borrower is submitting to a lender. So on one of the things lenders always ask for is give me 2 statements that show that this pay stub you're actually receiving, and this is not a documented pay stub. So in some cases, I may even go a step further and say, give me 2 to 3 months back statement. Let me see that you're actually receiving this income in your bank account. Then that gives me, at least for me, a little peace of mind that, okay, this job is legit. This income is coming in legit.
Yeah.
And the other part really is references too, right? You want to call their references. You want to find out a little bit about the character of the prospective tenant you're going to vet and make a judgment call. Some people may not accept sub stories, and that's okay. But sometimes it's okay to understand that people are going through things, especially in this rental market, which is insane, and and there's not enough houses for people to live in, and so there's got to be a little bit of that when you're looking at prospective tenants.
But I also want to warn against like some people dig too deep into prospective tenants, and they go a little bit too far. And you got to be mindful about like not going into stuff that's discriminatory. So specifying in your rental ad that you're looking for someone of a particular race or a particular gender or a particular dietary requirements. You want to stay away from that. Also, you want to, when you get their bank statements, you don't want to get into that too much and sort of analyzing how they spend their money and what they're spending their money on and stuff like that. Like you want to be respectful and you want to stay within the bounds of the law, right? Again, if you need a specific a person of a specific gender or a specific race, because you believe that the safety, you're renting out your basement or something like that, and you believe that your safety might be a risk and you're trying to take precautions, I would say do not advertise that rental in the public space. Talk to a friend and see if you can get a referral for a tenant. But in the public sphere, do not, put these sort of requirements along race, gender, sexual orientation, any of those lines. That is discriminatory. And also, if you're doing your investigation, try to be respectful of the person's privacy and the person's own, like, to be there, like they're a human being too. Like, just because you're the landlord doesn't mean that you're the lord of their lives, right? And I tell landlords this all the time. Lord is such a bad word. You're not the lord of their lives. You're not gonna monitor their coming and goings and sort of, pass what is respectful. You want to stay within the limits, stay respectful, respect that person as their own being and their own autonomy, and go from there. So again, just to reemphasize, be respectful and do not be discriminatory when seeking the right tenant.
And one other thing I'll add when it comes to references that recently came up is there are actually websites that allow you to check the history of a tenant's if they've been reported. For instance, if they're going through landlord and tenancy issues with a previous landlord, because you're checking references and someone can tell you, well, this landlord was my previous this person was my previous landlord, but they give you their friend's number, but it wasn't really. There's a website that I just found out just a few days ago. Actually, there are two of them. There is Canley, so that's CANLII.org. It's a database that searches when you go on that website. I know we'll put the link for this in the show notes. When you go on the website, there's a landlord and tenant portion that allows you to type in your prospective tenant's name and to see if they've had any past issues with any past landlords on that is currently ongoing or in the past. And it is another website called...
And these are stuff that's in the landlord-tenant tribunal,
exactly.
Tribunal, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, so not issues. So I guess there's no way, if someone destroyed your property, unless you filed something with the landlord-tenant board, it wouldn't be on this site, right?
It wouldn't be on that site.
Gotcha.
And there's another site called openroom.ca. And this one just started recently, and this allows both landlords and tenants to report issues that they've had with either a landlord or with a tenant. So I think using those two websites, you can kind of look at the reference and see, does this prospective tenant have any past issues that I need to be aware of? And sometimes, take those things and make a decision from there, right? Because we do know that even though the landlord and tenancy board favors mostly tenants, there are situations where the landlords are the ones that are being knuckleheads. And so even when there is a case on the landlord and tenant board, try and get more information about it and try to determine who was really at fault here. Was it a tenant or was it a landlord? And make your judgment call. But do not ignore the red flags. Do not ignore character issues. Do not ignore even when we're talking about red flags. For instance, I had a client that signed up with a property manager, and I'll use that in quotes here for those who are listening. And the property manager collected the first rent from the prospective tenants and never deposited it, but gave the new tenant the keys. And the tenant had the keys before the property manager actually deposited the check, only for the check to bounce. Oh, no. So the very first check bounced. And that's part of what we're talking about when we say doing due diligence, right? Collect the first rent, make sure the first rent clears, look for the signals that may tell you whether or not this is legit. You mentioned issues. The different things you got to look for, right?
I've seen issues where the tenant was required to pay first and last month's rent, and they did so in small increments. It was $500 here, $300 here, $200 there. I think the first and last was altogether about $4,000. And they were only able to do it in these small increments. And that was a huge red flag. Because if the tenant is struggling to come up with the first and last month's rent. And I think that's why that was put in as a sort of standard to start your tenancy, which is the first and last, because it in a very small way, it shows your ability to come up with this sum of money on a regular basis. So first and last month's rent. And from what I understand, that tenant was not very consistent with rent payments because and maybe that was an indication off the top. They just could not find the first and last month's rent, and sort of was downhill from there.
So, I think to wrap this up, the common things we're saying here is vet your tenants properly. If you're going to do this yourself, then use some of the tools that we've talked about. Collect their employment information. The website to also as a landlord to be able to pull the credit is, what did we say it was? It was
Single Key.
SingleKey.com.
Yeah, and I think they offer some other services to landlords trying to do it themselves. So check that out, SingleKey.com, for more information.
Do your due diligence, check your references, and go with your gut. Sometimes your gut can be wrong, but at least be comfortable with the decision you made, that if it goes south, you did the best you could, and there was no way you could have foreseen tenancy issues. So I hope this was informative for our listeners. Thank you very much for joining us.
And maybe another time we can touch on the landlord-tenant board and how that works. I think there's some other little things we should touch on. So for sure, this was a good conversation, and I think there's a lot more interesting stuff we can touch on for sure.
And we will touch on that on the next segment of this episode, where we have my good friend and property management genius, Christine Abankwa. I have worked with her for a few years now. She's also a realtor, and she'll be joining us in this next segment. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
This is all the time we have for today. Thanks for listening to the True Wealth Podcast. Don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to the True Wealth Podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at True Wealth Pod. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, ideas, and questions with us on our social media platforms or email us at podcast@truewealthadvisors.ca. And who knows, your question might be the subject of a future episode.